All right. Well, thank you all for joining. My name is Martha Campbell, and I am the Chief Program Officer here at Michigan Saves. And we're really excited to share with you an opportunity to receive free technical assistance to pursue renewable energy projects leveraging federal tax credits and elective pay. I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Mike Wilson, the Director of Finance at Michigan Saves and an elective pay ambassador, as well as our partner, John Kinch, the Executive Director of Michigan Energy Options. This work is supported by a grant from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy through the My Healthy Climate Challenge. So, next slide. Now, just a little housekeeping. Please enter your name and organization in the chat. We'd love to have folks know who's in the room with them. And if you have questions, please do feel free to enter them in the chat. If it's something, that we can immediately answer, we'll try and do that in real time, but there will definitely be a 10-minute, if not longer, Q&A at the end of the presentation. And we will be recording this today and sharing this along with some additional resources via email after the presentation. Next slide. So just a little bit about what we'll cover today. As I mentioned, our goal is to show how nonprofits and government entities can access affordable financing and free technical assistance to unlock utility bill savings through federal clean energy credits and projects. We'll go over the technical assistance that's available to assess the feasibility of projects, support with project planning, how to access those federal tax credits specifically for entities that don't really have tax appetite, how to access financing to support these projects, and then some critical dates to keep in mind that are coming up as it relates to federal tax incentives. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Mike, who's going to share a little bit about what elective pay is.
Thank you, Martha. Good afternoon, everyone. So the crux of it, what is elective pay? Elective pay is also known as the investment tax credit or direct pay, and it allows tax-exempt entities to take advantage of pursuing clean energy projects and receive a cash payment back from the IRS. This was put in place by the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 and essentially unlocks additional capital for houses of worship, government entities, school districts, and nonprofit organizations to be able to pursue clean energy projects that may not have been feasible. As you can see on the slide here, the tax credit is typically 30% as the base credit. If you're pursuing a larger project, the base credit goes down unless certain requirements are being met. But for most intents and purposes, 30% is the floor tax credit that you can expect to receive if you pursue one of these clean energy projects. When I say clean energy projects, we're talking primarily about solar, battery storage, and ground source geothermal projects. So your eligibility essentially just comes down to your tax exempt status. If you are a nonprofit, a local unit of government, a school district, a house of worship, you would qualify if you were to pursue one of these projects. Next slide. So as I mentioned, these are the eligible entity types. I did not mention rural electric co-ops and public power, but they also qualify, as well as tribal governments. Our particular focus in the past has been on nonprofits and houses of worship, but we are open to assisting any and all of these types of entities. Next slide. So as I alluded to on the previous slides, the tax credit amount is typically a 30% base credit. If you are pursuing one of these larger projects that would exceed 1 megawatt, the base credit becomes 6%, and to obtain the 30%, you actually have to meet what's called prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. We won't spend too much time on that because for most entities that are on the call and most entities that we assist, they're not pursuing a project of that size. There's also several bonus adders that can be included to augment that base 30%. Some of the notable ones are the 10% domestic content, which involves using US made materials, panels, inverters, things of that nature in your project. There's also a very simple bonus adder that is based simply on geography called the Energy Community Bonus Adder. And this is simply qualified for by where the project is going to be physically located. And the most typical areas that would qualify for an energy community would be things that are like a coal closure census tract or an adjacent coal closure census tract, but also brownfields can also qualify for these energy community bonus adders. Now, John Kinch, our resident expert on brownfields, I'd like to pass it to him and just kind of touch on that a little bit.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Michigan Energy Options, if you don't know who we are, we're a nonprofit company that focuses on programs, projects, planning, and does some policy work as well. We've been around since 1978. Let me tell you why I think elective pay for nonprofits or tax-exempt entities is such a big deal. Some years ago, we built a community solar park on a brownfield, actually a closed landfill in East Lansing, Michigan. And when we began to put this project together back then, there was no such thing as elective pay. There was the investment tax credit for for-profits, but not for nonprofits. And so in order to put the capital stack together, I had to run around and try to figure out a way to get that 30%. One of the things I had to do is I had to form a new company under us, an LLC called Community Energy Options. But then I had to go around and try to find a tax equity investor who wanted to invest in a project our size. At the time, our project was small. It still is small today. But I remember calling some firms out in California and having a conversation with a fellow who said, "How big is your project again? 34 megawatts?" And I said, no, 345 kilowatts. And I could hear him laughing on the phone at the other end of the line because that was such a low amount and not worth the trouble. So that this is part of now the mix of how we can capitalize projects for communities. Elective pay is a huge deal. And we should all be extremely grateful for that. And so next slide, if you don't mind, Kelsey, I'll take folks through a little bit. Here's some of the math on the project to help you understand what this can do to knock off that bottom line cost for a project. So let's say, for instance, that you've got that 30% as well as you're putting this on a brownfield. So you got an extra 10% on it. So out of a $250,000 project, and let's say $2.50 an installed watt, you'd be getting $100,000 back. So your all-in cost would be $150,000. Okay. Now, looking at your annual energy consumption, and I'll talk about that in a second, you could be realizing as much as $15,000 a year, or actually more, in energy savings. You'd be taking that bite out of your utility bill year over year. The payback in this case is very conservative, about 10 years, but you can do better than that. And then, like I said, capital stacks are all about how you blend money into it. Michigan Saves, and Mike can talk more about this, provides bridge loans. There's other ways you can leverage in funding. The important part to remember here is that that 30% is cash in your pocket. Because we are, as nonprofits like ourselves, we don't have a tax appetite, but you get actually that money back to you in about a year's time. Is that right, Mike? Thereabout?
Yeah, depending on your filing deadline, it can be quite quick. If you're installing in a calendar year, it can take anywhere from 6 to 8 months just based on timing.
Right. Okay. Good.
But
Good.
if there
Good.
is some sort of delay beyond what is deemed acceptable by the IRS, entities can actually earn interest on their elective payment if it is a prolonged wait time to actually receive your credit as well.
Great. Yeah, even better. Even better. Now, this model that I'm showing you here is generic. And there's all kinds of things that go into modeling energy savings and financial returns. And that's one of the things that Michigan Energy Options does, and I'll tell you more about it. But there's some assumptions to this model you're looking at. We're assuming that you're paying about 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour for your electricity, That varies all over the state incredibly. Also, we're assuming that your particular incumbent utility doesn't have time of use rates. Some do. The big ones do, the investor-owned utilities like consumers and DTE, but smaller municipal and cooperatives might not. And time of use really is about a load shifting and doing some things like that, which can also help uh, your payback and your eventual investment in this project. The other thing this is not showing you is your load. It's not giving you any kind of a load profile of your facility, your building. In other words, how much energy are you using, how you're using it over the course of a day, over the course of a week, whether you're open on the weekends, so on and so forth. So one of the things that we do, and I think probably the next slide would be good to click over to, is we look at projects and we essentially de-risk and de-cost them. And by that, I mean, we go in there and do feasibility studies for facilities. Sometimes it can be one building, sometimes it's a group of buildings, a group of different sites. But what we do is then we analyze what's going on in those buildings in terms of their consumption patterns. We figure out what utility rate what rate they're at. And then we also then look at whether or not the building has had an energy efficiency improvements made recently, or it could use some, is eligible for some. And then from there, we begin to build our models where we determine how much solar can be located on the site, what kind of payback you could be looking at if you did this or that. The important part of this equation all the time is your own will. In other words, for your facility, your nonprofit, your local unit of government, your house of worship, what do you want to see with this project? Do you want to see 30% of your energy coming from your on-site solar, 50%, 80%, 10%? It all depends. So we help you kind of look at that and think your way through that, understanding that the utilities have various kinds of interconnection agreements and various kinds of policy that essentially restrict what you can do or not do on that site. We provide you all that information and reports and conversations and such. And what you can do with that, if you are a local unit of government and are required by your bylaws, by statute, to go out for competitive bids, we can help you write an RFP, and then we can help you review your bids to find out which one seems to be the best for you. We've been doing that work for a number of years for the state of Michigan, in particular the DNR. So if any of you are traveling around the state of Michigan and you're in the Holland State Park, for example, and look up at that bathhouse, you'll see a bunch of solar on the roof as well as some EV charging stations. So that's the kind of work we've been able to do for local units of government. We think of ourselves as the owner's rep to help de-risk and de-cost those projects. And then the other couple entities in this are the Myotech and Michigan Saves. And I believe, Mike, you're going to speak to both of those.
I will.
Thank you.
So I have noticed that I have a few fellow ambassadors on here. Welcome. So the Michigan Infrastructure Office Technical Assistance Center, otherwise known as Myotech, has created an elective pay ambassador program to essentially spread the good word on elective pay. We want to get as many federal tax dollars back into the state of Michigan as possible by helping these tax-exempt entities like yours pursue these clean energy projects. Now, these elected pay ambassadors are statewide and are local to you and can help assist you on essentially all questions related to the elected pay process, from simply answering questions of, does this qualify? How do I determine my tax exempt status? All the way through to actually walking you through the pre-filing process of your project with the IRS and identifying any potential bonus adders. So as we mentioned previously, the 30% is really the base, but often these projects that you are thinking of pursuing or are currently pursuing could qualify for 40%, 50% of that upfront cash back to you in the form of a direct payment. And like John said, this isn't just a credit against what is owed because you're tax exempt. This is money back in your pocket. So these ambassadors are well versed in the technicalities surrounding the process and are ready and willing to help you for free navigate the complexities with the IRS, with the adders, and just the base credit. So if you have any further questions on that, you can always visit the Myotech website, and I believe it's linked at the end of this webinar. And you can find your local ambassador or reach out directly to me, and I can help navigate you to that ambassador who would be more than willing to assist you in that process. And then as far as Michigan Saves goes, we also offer the technical assistance by nature of me being an ambassador, but we also provide financing. We understand that a lot of these projects that tax-exempt entities are pursuing have a high upfront cost. And it's pretty common for entities like yourselves to be a bit capital constrained. So Michigan Saves fills that void by providing low-cost financing to bridge the gap between when you're actually going to receive the credit and when you're undergoing construction on the project. Now, our bridge loans are a 3.99% annual interest rate, which is well below market, and the principal and interest are actually not due until the time of your receipt of the elective pay credit or 2 years after the loan is closed. Now, we give you 2 years because, as John alluded to and I mentioned previously, there can be a variation of when you actually receive the elective pay credit depending on your calendar fiscal year. So we want to give entities ample time to file for their return, receive their payment, and make payment in advance of that 2 year deadline. The good thing about the Michigan Saves Bridge Loan too is that you actually, if you were to receive your credit, say 6 to 8 months after you file and place your project in service, you're not actually going to pay the full amount of interest that you would have accrued if you were to wait the full 2 years. So it's a very competitive financing option in the field. We'll touch on some other financing options as well, but we really think that Michigan Saves has set itself apart and become a leader in this field by offering such low-cost financing to entities such as yours. Yep, thank you. So yeah, there are many financing solutions out there for entities that are pursuing these clean energy projects. As I mentioned, Michigan Saves Bridge Loan, 3.99% interest. That does include a 1% upfront origination fee, which frankly is peanuts, especially for the types of projects that we're looking at. Say you're pursuing a $30,000 solar project, that's $300 upfront, which basically just covers the time and effort necessary for us to do our due diligence, our underwriting documentation, and the time and effort spent to help you pursue the project. The typical term is actually going to be less than 24 months. 24 months is the maximum. But as I said, with these short-term turnarounds, often they'll not even go 12 months. It's really best utilized for capital constrained entities that want to pursue a solar project, but don't have the capital necessary to make that down payment with the installer, or just need some extra help in between bridging that gap between they actually receive the credit. There's other options available, particularly for governmental entities or school districts. We understand the complexities surrounding this, and typically these would involve an installment purchase agreement. The installment purchase agreements can have a much longer term than the Michigan Saves Bridge Loan. The interest rate would vary depending on where you decided to pursue an installment purchase agreement. Michigan Saves currently has a product that could service these types of entities, and we would like to keep the interest rate in the ballpark of our bridge loan. But we're certainly open and willing to help governments and school districts navigate this process. We understand that it is much more complex than simply lending to a house of worship or a nonprofit, but we're there to walk you through that process as well. And if you're looking beyond Michigan Saves, there's other entities that can also provide financing solutions as well. The Justice Climate Fund, in collaboration with local CDFIs, the Michigan CDFI Coalition, and Revolve, also have undergone a Michigan Elective Pay Accelerator program. They will augment Michigan Saves Bridge Loan or provide 100% of the project costs in the form of a construction loan. We do not have their published rates, but we do expect them to be below the market if you were to go to a standard financial institution. And then Climate First Bank also offers a product that has a very long term of 25 to 25 and a half years. They'll also provide loans for up to 100% of the project costs if the project is going to exceed $25,000. As you can see, the interest rate is quite a bit higher, but it is still competitive in the market concerning other construction loans. And critical deadlines. So this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. So July 4th, 2026 is a big deadline for entities that are thinking about or are currently pursuing a clean energy project. This is the safe harbor deadline to begin construction. Now, when we say begin construction, if your project is over 1.5 megawatts, beginning construction is exactly what it sounds like. Physical work of a significant nature must have started prior to this deadline. For most entities on this call and most entities that we help, you're not pursuing a project that's 1.5 megawatts or greater. So a nice workaround is what's called the safe harbor provision, where essentially if you incur 5% of the total project cost prior to July 4th, you have satisfied the begin construction requirement. Now, I will caveat this by saying that in practice and as a best practice, we highly recommend, if you're able, to incur 10% of the total project cost, because estimated project costs can change, scopes of work can change over the course of the project, and you don't want to get to having placed your project in service and your costs increase, 50%, and then all of a sudden what you put down as your initial down payment, you thought you safe harbored adequately. Well, it could be ruled ineligible because it's based on the final project cost, not what is estimated up front. So if there's one thing to take away, it's please pursue these projects by putting down 10% of the total project cost before July 4th. If you are able to do so, you have 4 years to place that project in service. Now, it's not the end of the world if you do not meet this deadline. Often these projects that are smaller than 1.5 megawatt can very well be completed in under a year. But the reason for this kind of mad dash to the 4th of July is because these projects that don't start construction until after will be subject to a December 31st, 2027 deadline to place the project in service. Now, when I say placed in service, it does not mean just physical construction is completed. And I'm sure the solar installers on the call know exactly what I'm talking about. They can do everything right. They can have the project done in a speedy timeline, but it falls on the utility to actually come out, provide their final permits, their permit to operate, to actually place the project in service. So a lot of it is out of the control of both you as the tax exempt entity and the installer themselves for the project to be placed in service. So it's important to, work with your installer and get an adequate timeline, but also leave some wiggle room if you are going to be beginning construction after July 4th, just to ensure that the utilities have adequate time to come and do their final walkthroughs, complete their interconnection agreements, and submit the permit to operate. Next slide.
Thanks for talking to me, Mike. Thank you. That makes me think of all kinds of things. One of which is that there are a number of important entities that are required to make solar projects happen, even those that are BTM or behind the meter, which is what we're talking about. One of them, of course, is your incumbent utility who services your community. The other one is what's going on in your local jurisdiction in terms of zoning and ordinances for solar. Do you have policies in place? What are the permitting requirements, some of those kinds of things. So if you're just kind of noodling around the possibility of a project, I recommend that you begin to look into a little bit of that. A lot of that information should be on websites that you can get to, and we also have some resources we can help you out to find that out. Because Mike is absolutely right. This is a process with a number of touch points along with, and some of it is outside of your control. I'm going to talk about a couple things here, at least the first one, which is really important. I kind of hit on it, and I'll hit on it again, is that our role in this as technical advisors is to really help you decide whether you have a project or not. So one of the first things we work to get to is a go, no go. And you'd be surprised of the projects that we've looked at in the past that seem like they're slam dunks, and then there's some reason that they're not going to be able to be completed. And other projects are not going to be able to be completed for all kinds of other reasons. So each project is individual. It's idiosyncratic. And so that's why, you need to kind of engage someone. If it's not us, engaging a solar installer company to help you out to decide if you even have a project. The other important pieces of these kinds of projects, especially if you're a public entity like a school district or a local unit of government, is if you have political buy-in, do you have others in your ken who want to see this move forward? You've got a climate plan, you've got a carbon plan, you've got something in your CIP, your master planning that says, you want to move forward on this. That helps you. So, it's also fine if you just have an idea and you want to talk to me about it. Love to hear it. But we're probably given the short timeline that Mike pointed out to everybody. Those projects, they don't have to be shovel ready yet, but at least you got to get the shovel out of the shed, I think, to kind of begin to have a project put together. So I would recommend that strongly. Again, as Mike said, follow up with your ambassadors. We can connect you to those kinds of things like that. And then one more time, I'll say this, that for those entities out there that by statute are required to go and create an RFP and to go out and get competitive bids, that's where our technical assistance can really help you, because we've done that all over the place. If you're a private nonprofit and you've got a solar company you know and love and want to just have a conversation with them and get a project moving with them, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. All I would say is just make sure that they are up on, and most of them are, what this elective pay is all about and how it can benefit to you. Michael Larson, who's actually a city commissioner in Marquette and works with Michigan Energy Options, is our assistant director. Anything from your standpoint that comes to mind?
Honestly, I think you've covered, it very, very well. But, from a city perspective, we're always, we certainly always look towards, projects that make sense, and making sure, that they're coming at us, with timely fashion, so we're able to get ahead of them on that. So I certainly appreciate you laying it out like that. But I think you've covered the bases.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Michael. Mike, I think it's back to you about um, one last thing about the contractor, by the way. There's a lot of resources out there on solar contractors. The Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, of which I'm on the board, keeps a running list. Michigan Saves keeps a running list. There's other lists around there. There's really good ones in our state that are Michigan-based solar contractors. Once in a while, somebody slips in, offers you a deal that's too good to be true, and it is. So just be careful with that. And again, if you are down the road on this and you want some advice or just some conversation, we'd be happy to have it with you regarding the whole world of solar installers and solar companies and solar developers and all that. So now, Mike, I think step 3 is you.
Yeah, so as I alluded to previously, step 3 would be apply for financing. Michigan Saves is there to help you determine your financing needs, if a bridge loan or installment purchase agreement would fit the profile for your capital stack, or if you're looking for additional funds, we can advise on fundraising, potential grant opportunities, or other financing institutions that may be able to help contribute to your project. Of course, as I mentioned before, the bridge loan covers the amount of the tax credit that you would expect to receive. So just giving a typical project with no bonus adders, that would be 30% of the total project cost. If you plan to self-finance the other 70%, that's great. If not, there are other resources that Michigan Saves can help connect you to bring these projects to fruition. Step 4 would be completing installation and placing the project in service. Like we said on the previous slides, there are some deadlines to keep in mind for this to be eligible for elective pay. We can also help as both ambassadors and Michigan Saves walk you through the process and reiterate the deadlines just to make sure that your project is indeed going to qualify for the elective payment. And then step 5 is actually filing the return. We know a lot of entities on here are tax exempt. We hope they are, because you're our target audience. And that often means maybe you haven't filed a tax return before. We can help deal with the IRS, pre-registering your project through their portal, creating what's called an ID.me account so that you can identify your entity to the IRS and ultimately receive your IRS payment. Now, I will caveat this with the MyoTac elective pay ambassadors are not tax advisors. We will provide you procedural technical assistance, but it is important to consult with your CPA when filing your return. There are some resources available through the infrastructure office to connect you with CPAs that are well versed in the filing process if you do not have a contracted CPA. And often local governments may be eligible for free return filing through the partnership with Raymond Advisors CPA, which has contracted with the Michigan Infrastructure Office to assist entities like yours in claiming your elective payments. John.
Yeah, how are we doing on time? Because I think this is kind of the wrap up of what we've been I'm saying. And like I said, I want to put myself out there, and I'm more than willing to have a phone conversation with you if you're just kind of noodling around a project you think you have in mind. I can also make available to folks examples of those feasibility studies we do that provide financial modeling and payback, as well as energy production against what you're consuming in your building. And the other thing to think about too is kind of future proofing your facilities. I know that lots of places are beginning to introduce EV charging stations and all the rest, which is good. But I also mean future proofing in the sense that even if you're getting some modest amount of self-generation on your site, 20, 30%, 40%, that's a really good hedge against the future and against utility rate hikes, which are pretty consistent. So you're able to put solar in today, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, as those utility costs go up, you're going to look pretty smart by having done this. So I would encourage folks, if you're interested in this, look into it. And if you're beyond interested in moving forward, it is a short timeline. You're going to have to hustle, and our team will do everything we can to help you make your project a success. Martha, do you have anything to add on that?
No, except that time is of the essence. So we
Yeah.
highly encourage you, and if you're pursuing a project or you have organizations that you support or work with that are interested in pursuing renewable energy projects, to please contact us as soon as possible. I just want to reinforce that these looming deadlines are mainly around solar development, battery
Right.
storage, and geothermal projects. Those federal tax credits don't really sunset until the 2030s, early 2030s. But solar projects, the federal tax credits have that looming deadline of the project must be placed in service by the end of December 2027. So just want to kind of reiterate the urgency of this, communicating this to your networks and letting them know that this resource that we have between MEO and Michigan Saves is available to help them act quickly to try and meet these deadlines. So I think that concludes the discussion, or at least our presentation, but we want to open it up to any questions that folks may have.
Yeah, I saw one from Vanessa in the chat, and just to reiterate for everybody that didn't see it, she was wondering how to find out who her local ambassador is. And thanks to Lissa, my fellow ambassador, she put the link in the chat for the Elective Pay website, and I believe it's linked at the end of this presentation as well. But if you click on that link, it'll bring you to the Infrastructure Office's Technical Assistance Center webpage. And if you scroll down, you'll actually see an entire map of Michigan that's color coded based on region of ambassador. And if you just find your county, you'll be able to see a blow up window of who your ambassador is, contact information, and a quick little bio about them. So there's that. The contact information, Katrina, you can see it on our screen right now. If you have any questions regarding the financing or the ambassador program, you can feel free to reach out to me via phone or email. If you are looking at a project seriously and are determining that you need some technical assistance, some feasibility, maybe a payback period, a go or no go, so to speak, you can email or call John at the number and email listed as well. And with that, I will open it up to the floor. If anybody wants to just come off mute, feel free. Not all at once, though. All right. Well, if any of you do have any follow-up questions, again, Kelsey, are we going to be sending this webinar out to everybody as well? I believe so.
I can respond. Yes. We've been recording, and this will go out to all folks that registered after the webinar. And yes, please obviously feel free to share with other organizations as well that you think would be interested in receiving this support and pursuing these types of projects. And it was our pleasure. So thank you all for taking time this Thursday, and we'll conclude with that. And you have our contact information. We'll send this out to you, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.